The rain had been falling for 3 days straight, creating puddles on the streets that reflected the yellow glow of streetlights. Inside the small apartment on the second floor, Alex sat on his old couch, staring at the television without really watching. The news was playing, but the words seemed to bounce off his ears without meaning. 3 months. That's how long it had been since she left. 3 months of eating dinner alone, of waking up to silence, of conversations that only happened in his head. The apartment felt too big and too small at the same time. Too big because her absence made every corner echo with memories, and too small because the walls seemed to press in on him when the loneliness became too heavy to bear. He had gotten used to the routine. Wake up, coffee, work, come home, heat up something from a box, watch television until sleep finally came. Weekends were the worst. That's when the silence became loudest, when he found himself picking up his phone to call her, only to remember that she wouldn't answer. The sound of footsteps in the hallway outside didn't register at first. People lived in this building, people came and went. But these footsteps stopped right outside his door. Alex turned down the volume on the television, listening. Someone was standing there, just standing there, not moving. Then came the sound that made his heart skip, a key sliding into the lock. But that was impossible. He had changed the locks the week after she left. He remembered doing it, remembered the locksmith asking if he was sure, remembered nodding and paying the bill. Yet there it was again, the unmistakable sound of metal against metal, the soft click of tumblers falling into place. The door opened, slowly, quietly, as if whoever was coming in didn't want to disturb the peace of the evening. Alex stood up from the couch, his bare feet silent on the wooden floor. His heart was beating so loud he was sure she could hear it from across the room. And there she was, Maya, standing in the doorway with raindrops still clinging to her dark hair, her coat damp from the storm outside. She looked exactly the same and completely different all at once. The same gentle curve of her shoulders, the same way she tilted her head slightly when she was thinking. But there was something new in her eyes, something that hadn't been there before, a kind of tiredness mixed with determination. She closed the door behind her with the same careful, quiet she had used to open it. The soft click seemed to echo in the small space between them. Neither of them spoke. What was there to say? All the words they had thrown at each other 3 months ago still hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had burned too hot and too fast. Alex watched as she looked around the apartment, taking in the changes he had made. The photographs they had taken together were gone, stored away in a box under his bed. The throw pillows she had picked out were missing. The plant she had insisted on buying was dead by the window, brown leaves scattered on the sill like fallen hopes. But other things remained exactly as she had left them. Her favorite coffee mug still sat in the cabinet, washed and waiting. The book she had been reading was still on the nightstand, a receipt marking the page where she had stopped. He had moved it a dozen times, intending to put it away or return it to the shelf, but somehow it always ended up back in the same spot. Maya walked slowly through the living room, her fingers trailing along the back of the couch where they used to sit together on Sunday mornings, reading different sections of the newspaper and sharing interesting stories. She paused at the kitchen counter where they had shared so many quick breakfasts before work, where they had argued about whose turn it was to buy groceries, where they had planned weekend trips that now would never happen. The silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that comes between people who know each other so well that words sometimes feel unnecessary. Alex could tell from the way she moved that she was nervous, could see it in the careful way she set her keys down on the counter, could hear it in the slightly uneven rhythm of her breathing. He wanted to ask her why she had come. He wanted to ask how she still had a key, where she had been, if she was okay. He wanted to tell her that he had missed her every single day, that he had practiced conversations with her in his head, that he had kept her coffee mug clean just in case. But the words felt too big for the moment, too heavy for the delicate peace that had settled over the apartment. Instead, he just watched as she moved through their shared space like a careful ghost, touching nothing but seeing everything. The rain continued to fall outside, creating a soft rhythm against the windows that filled the silence between them with something like music. And for the first time in 3 months, the apartment didn't feel empty anymore. Maya moved through the apartment like she was walking through a museum of her own life. Every step was deliberate, careful, as if she was afraid that moving too quickly might shatter the fragile moment they had found themselves in. Alex stayed, where he was, leaning against the doorway between the kitchen and living room, giving her space to rediscover their shared world. She stopped at the bookshelf first, the one they had built together on a rainy Saturday 2 years ago. The instructions had been in 3 different languages, none of which they spoke fluently, and they had ended up with 2 extra screws and a shelf that tilted slightly to the left. They had laughed about it then, calling it character. Now Maya ran her finger along the edge of that crooked shelf, and Alex wondered if she was remembering the same afternoon he was. The books were mostly still in the same order she had arranged them. Alex had never been much of a reader, but Maya loved books the way some people loved music. She would spend entire evenings curled up in the corner of the couch, completely lost in whatever story had captured her attention. He used to tease her about it, calling her his little bookworm, but secretly he loved watching her read. The way her eyebrows would scrunch together during intense scenes, the way she would smile at parts that amused her, the way she would sometimes read passages aloud when she found something particularly beautiful. One book was missing from its usual spot. Alex knew which one without looking. It was a collection of poetry by a writer neither of them had heard of before, something Maya had picked up at a used bookstore downtown. She had been reading it the night they had their last fight, the night everything fell apart. He had found it on the coffee table the next morning, left open to a poem about love and forgiveness. He had closed it carefully and put it away in the drawer of his nightstand, unable to look at it but unable to throw it away either. Maya seemed to notice the gap on the shelf, her hand hovering over the empty space for a moment before moving on. She walked to the window next, where the dead plant sat like a brown accusation on the sill. They had bought it together at the farmer's market on one of their first dates. Maya had insisted that having a plant would make the apartment feel more like home. Alex had never been good with living things, but Maya had promised to take care of it. When she left, the plant became his responsibility, and within 2 weeks it was clear that he was failing miserably. He had tried everything he could think of. Too much water, then too little. Moving it from window to window, searching for the perfect amount of sunlight. But nothing worked. And eventually, he had given up, leaving it to die slowly while he watched, feeling like it was somehow a reflection of everything else he couldn't keep alive. Now Maya touched one of the brown leaves gently, and it crumbled between her fingers, falling to the floor like tiny pieces of regret. She looked at Alex then, really looked at him, and he saw something in her eyes that made his chest tight. It wasn't anger or sadness exactly, but something deeper and more complicated. Understanding, maybe. Or acceptance. She moved on to the coffee table, where their lives had played out in small daily rituals. This was where they had eaten breakfast on lazy Sunday mornings, where Maya had spread out her work papers when she brought projects home, where they had played cards during power outages and solved crossword puzzles together. The surface was clean now, empty except for a few magazines Alex had been using to avoid the silence. But Maya wasn't looking at what was there. She was looking at what wasn't there. The ceramic bowl where they used to keep their keys, the coasters she had bought to protect the wood, each one with a different flower painted on it. The small framed photo of them at her sister's wedding, both of them laughing at something someone had said just before the camera clicked. Alex had put all of those things away the week after she left, unable to bear the constant reminders of what he had lost. But now, watching Maya notice their absence, he realized that removing them hadn't made the memories go away. If anything, the empty spaces seemed to hold even more meaning than the objects themselves had. She sat down on the couch, in her old spot, the cushion that still bore the slight impression of her body even after 3 months. Alex wanted to join her, wanted to sit beside her like they had 1,000 times before, but something held him back. The distance between them felt enormous and fragile at the same time, like a bridge made of glass that might shatter if he put too much weight on it. Maya looked up at him, and for a moment it seemed like she was about to speak. Her lips parted, slightly, and Alex held his breath, waiting for words that might explain everything or change everything or fix everything. But then she closed her mouth again, and the moment passed like a cloud moving across the sun. Instead, she reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out something small. Alex couldn't see what it was from where he stood, but he watched as she placed it carefully on the coffee table between them. Then she leaned back against the couch and closed her eyes as if the simple act of being there, of breathing the same air as him again, was exhausting. The rain outside had softened to a gentle patter, and in the quiet apartment Alex could hear the sound of Maya's breathing, steady and familiar. He realized that this was the first time in 3 months that he hadn't felt completely alone, even though they still hadn't spoken a single word to each other. Sometimes, he thought, the most important conversations happen in the spaces between words, in the things we choose not to say, in the careful way we move through shared spaces that hold the weight of all our history together. The small object Maya had placed on the coffee table caught the light from the lamp beside the couch. Alex could see it now, a tiny silver key on a simple chain. Not the apartment key, something smaller, more delicate. He recognized it immediately. It was the key to the music box he had given her for her birthday 2 years ago, a little wooden thing with a ballerina that spun when you wound it up. Maya had loved it, not because it was expensive or fancy, but because he had remembered her, telling him about a similar one she had owned as a child. The music box was gone now, probably packed away with all the other pieces of their life together that Maya had taken when she left. But she had kept the key, carried it with her all this time. Alex wondered what that meant, what message she was trying to send by placing it there between them like a bridge made of silver and memory. Maya opened her eyes and looked at him, really looked at him this time, not just glancing or observing, but seeing him in that deep way that had always made him feel both exposed and safe at the same time. She had always been good at that, at looking past the surface of things to find the truth underneath. It was one of the things that had drawn him to her in the first place, and one of the things that had terrified him when their relationship started falling apart. Slowly, deliberately, Maya stood up from the couch. She reached for the zipper of her jacket, a simple black thing she had worn on their first date 3 years ago. Alex remembered because he had helped her out of it that night, his hand shaking slightly as he hung it carefully on the hook by his door. She had teased him about being nervous, but the truth was that she had made him nervous in the best possible way, the way that meant something important was beginning. Now she pulled the zipper down with the same careful attention she gave to everything that mattered. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the quiet apartment, each tiny click of the metal teeth like a small declaration. She shrugged the jacket off her shoulders and let it fall to the floor, something the Maya he remembered would never have done. She had always been so careful with her clothes, hanging everything up immediately, smoothing out wrinkles with her hands. But this Maya, this version of her standing in his living room after 3 months of absence was different somehow, not completely different, but changed in ways that Alex was only beginning to understand. There was a kind of resolve in her movements now, a purposefulness that hadn't been there before. She reached for the hem of her sweater next, a soft gray, thing that Alex had always loved on her. It brought out the color of her eyes, made her skin look warm and golden. She had been wearing it the day they had their first real fight, 6 months into their relationship, about something so small and stupid that neither of them could remember what it was afterward. They had made up that same evening, apologizing over dinner at their favorite restaurant, promising to communicate better, to not let small things grow into big things. But they had broken that promise, hadn't they? They had let the small things pile up like stones in a wall, each tiny resentment and misunderstanding adding another layer between them until they couldn't see over it anymore. Maya pulled the sweater over her head and dropped it on top of her jacket. She was wearing a simple white shirt underneath, nothing fancy or special, just soft cotton that had probably been washed 100 times. But there was something about the way she moved, the deliberate nature of her actions that made even this simple gesture feel significant. Alex understood that she wasn't trying to seduce him or manipulate him. This wasn't about desire or attraction or any of the physical aspects of their relationship. This was about something deeper, something that went beyond the surface of skin and touch. Maya was showing him that she was willing to be vulnerable again, willing to remove the layers of protection she had built up during their time apart. She sat back down on the couch, her movements careful and graceful. The lamp beside her cast a warm circle of light that seemed to separate them from the rest of the world, creating a small island of intimacy in the middle of all their uncertainty. Alex could see the rise and fall of her breathing, the way her hands rested calmly in her lap, the slight tilt of her head that meant she was thinking about something important. "I kept dreaming about this room," she said finally, her voice soft but clear in the quiet space between them. They were the first words either of them had spoken since she had walked through the door, and they seemed to hang in the air like something fragile and precious. Alex felt his throat tighten with emotion. Her voice was exactly the same, warm and musical, with that slight hoarseness she always had when she was tired or emotional. He had replayed the sound of it in his head so many times over the past 3 months that he had started to worry he was forgetting what she really sounded like. But now she was here, real and present and speaking to him, and it was like hearing music after months of silence. "Every night," Maya continued, her eyes fixed on the coffee table where the small key still gleamed in the lamplight, "I would dream about sitting right here, in this exact spot, and everything would be the way it used to be. We would be talking about our days or planning something for the weekend or just sitting together watching television. Normal things, easy things." Alex wanted to move closer to her, wanted to close the space between them and take her hands in his, but something held him back. This moment felt too important to rush, too delicate to push. Maya was giving him something precious by sharing her dreams, by admitting that she had missed this place, missed him, missed the simple daily rhythms they had built together. "But then I would wake up," Maya said, finally looking up at him, "and remember why I left. Remember all the things we said to each other, all the ways we hurt each other. And I would think about calling you, about coming back. But I was too afraid, too proud maybe, too scared that nothing had really changed." The admission hung between them like a confession, honest and raw and beautiful in its simplicity. Alex felt something in his chest loosen, a knot of tension and fear that he hadn't even realized he had been carrying. Alex felt the weight of Maya's words settle over the room like a blanket. Her honesty was both a gift and a challenge, an invitation to be equally vulnerable, equally brave. He took a deep breath, tasting the familiar scent of her perfume mixed with the rain she had brought in from outside. It was a smell that belonged to 1,000 different memories, good ones and difficult ones, all tangled together in the complicated web of their shared history. "I kept your coffee mug clean," he said finally, the words coming out rougher than he intended. "Every morning I would see it in the cabinet, and every morning I would take it out and wash it again, even though it was already clean. I told myself it was just habit, but I think I was keeping it ready, just in case." Maya's eyes softened at this admission, and Alex saw something there that he had been afraid he might never see again. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. Recognition of the small ways people show love even when they think love is lost. She stood up from the couch slowly, her movements careful and deliberate. The lamplight caught the silver chain around her neck, a simple piece of jewelry he had given her for no special reason other than he had seen it in a shop window and thought of her. She was still wearing it, he realized. After everything that had happened between them, after all the angry words and slammed doors and long silences, she had kept wearing something he had chosen for her. "Alex," she said, and his name in her voice was like coming home after a long journey. "I need to tell you something. I need to tell you why I came back tonight, why I couldn't stay away anymore." He nodded, not trusting his voice to remain steady if he tried to speak. Maya took a step toward him, closing some of the careful distance they had been maintaining. She was close enough now that he could see the small scar on her chin from when she had fallen off her bike as a child, close enough to notice that her hair was slightly longer than it had been when she left. "I went to see my sister last week," Maya continued, her voice steady but quiet. "You remember how she always said we were perfect for each other? How she used to joke that she had never seen two people who fit together the way we did. Alex remembered. Maya's sister had been their biggest supporter from the beginning, always making jokes about when they were going to get married, always taking pictures of them together at family gatherings. She had been almost as heartbroken as Maya when their relationship ended. "She told me something," Maya said, taking another small step closer. "She said that the way I talked about you, even when I was angry, even when I was listing all the reasons why we were wrong for each other, she could tell that I was still in love with you. She said it was in my voice, in the way I couldn't quite let go of the good memories even when I was trying to focus on the bad ones." Alex felt his heart beating faster, hope and fear wrestling in his chest like two animals fighting over the same small space. Maya was so close now that he could reach out and touch her if he wanted to, could brush that strand of hair away from her face the way he used to do when she was concentrating on something difficult. She was right, Maya whispered, and the admission seemed to surprise her as much as it did him. "I tried so hard to stop loving you, Alex. I tried to convince myself that we were too different, that we wanted different things, that we brought out the worst in each other instead of the best. But the truth is I never stopped. Not for a single day." The space between them seemed to shrink without either of them moving, as if the very air was pulling them together. Alex could see the slight tremble in Maya's hands, could hear the way her breathing had become shallow and quick. She was scared, he realized. Scared of being hurt again, scared of hoping for something that might not be possible, scared of the risk that came with loving someone completely. "I never stopped either," Alex said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Even when I was furious with you, even when I told myself I was better off alone, I never stopped loving you. It was like trying to stop breathing." Maya's eyes filled with tears then, but they weren't sad tears. They were the kind of tears that come when something inside you finally relaxes, when you realize you've been holding your breath for months and can finally let it out. She reached up and touched his face, her palm warm against his cheek, her thumb brushing away a tear he didn't realize had fallen. "I'm so sorry," she said, and he could hear years of regret in those 3 simple words. "I'm sorry for all the things I said, for the way I left, for staying away so long when all I wanted was to come home." Alex covered her hand with his own, pressing it closer to his face, memorizing the feel of her skin against his. "I'm sorry too," he said, "for everything I did wrong, for not fighting harder to keep us together, for being too stubborn to call you first." And then, as naturally as breathing, Maya stepped into his arms. It wasn't dramatic or passionate, but it was perfect in its simplicity. She pressed herself against him, her head finding its familiar place against his shoulder, her arms wrapping around his waist like she was afraid he might disappear if she didn't hold on tight enough. Alex felt the last of his defenses crumble as he held her. All the walls he had built around his heart, all the ways he had tried to protect himself from missing her, all the careful distance he had maintained even in his dreams, it all fell away in an instant. She was real and warm and here, choosing to trust him with her heart again despite all the ways he had failed to protect it before. They stood there in the lamplight, holding each other like survivors of the same shipwreck who had finally found their way to shore. The rain outside had stopped completely, and the apartment was so quiet that Alex could hear Maya's heartbeat against his chest, steady and strong and alive. "I missed this," Maya whispered against his shoulder. "I missed you so much I thought I might die from it sometimes." Alex tightened his arms around her, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the solid reality of her body against his after months of only memories. "You're here now," he said. "That's all that matters. You're here." The first thing Alex noticed when he woke up was the smell of coffee. Real coffee, not the instant stuff he had been making for himself for the past 3 months. The rich, warm scent filled the apartment like a promise, like the first sign that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be different now. Sunlight was streaming through the bedroom window, golden and gentle, painting patterns on the walls that Alex had forgotten were possible. During the months Maya had been gone, he had kept the curtains closed most of the time, preferring the artificial light of lamps to the reminder of days passing without her. But now the light felt welcoming, like an old friend returning after a long absence. He could hear her moving around in the kitchen, the familiar sounds that had once been the soundtrack to his mornings. The soft clink of mugs being set on the counter, the whisper of bare feet on the wooden floor, the gentle hum she always made when she was concentrating on something simple and pleasant. These were the sounds of home, the sounds he had tried, so hard to forget because remembering them hurt too much. Alex got up slowly, pulling on the same clothes he had been wearing the night before. Everything felt different in the morning light, more real somehow. Last night had felt like a dream, too perfect and fragile to trust completely. But now, with the coffee smell and the sound of Maya in his kitchen, he was starting to believe that maybe it had really happened. Maybe she had really come back. He found her standing by the window looking out at the street below. She was wearing one of his old shirts, a faded blue thing from college that had always been too big for her. It used to drive him crazy when she wore his clothes, not because he minded, but because she looked so perfectly at home in them, so naturally his. Now seeing her in that familiar shirt again, he felt something settle in his chest that he hadn't even realized was still unsettled. "Good morning," Maya said without turning around, as if she could sense his presence behind her. Her voice was soft and a little hoarse, the way it always was first thing in the morning. "I hope you don't mind. I made coffee the way I used to. I couldn't remember if you still liked it that way." "I do," Alex said, and it was true. He had tried to change his coffee routine after she left, tried to make it weaker or stronger or with different additions, but nothing had ever tasted right. Eventually, he had given up and just started drinking the instant stuff because it didn't remind him of anything. Maya turned to face him and Alex saw that she looked different in the morning light. Softer somehow, more like the person he remembered falling in love with 3 years ago. Her hair was messy from sleep and there were creases on her cheek from the pillowcase, and she was more beautiful than he had allowed himself to remember. "We need to talk," she said, and Alex felt his stomach drop. Those 4 words had started so many difficult conversations between them, had been the beginning of so many fights and misunderstandings. But Maya must have seen the fear in his face, because she reached out and touched his arm gently. "Not like that," she said. "Not like before. We need to talk about how we're going to do this differently." Alex nodded, relief flooding through him. She was right, of course. Just because they had found their way back to each other didn't mean they had solved all the problems that had driven them apart in the first place. Love was important, maybe the most important thing, but it wasn't magic. It couldn't fix everything all by itself. They sat at the small kitchen table, the same one where they had shared thousands of meals and conversations over the years. Maya had made 2 cups of coffee, both in their old mugs, both exactly the way they liked them. It was such a simple thing, but it felt like a small miracle after months of eating and drinking alone. "I've been thinking," Maya said, wrapping her hands around her mug for warmth, "about what went wrong between us, about why we stopped being able to talk to each other without fighting." Alex waited, sipping his coffee and trying not to interrupt. One of their biggest problems had always been that they both wanted to be heard so badly that they forgot to listen. He was determined not to make that mistake again. "I think we stopped seeing each other," Maya continued. "Not literally, obviously, but really seeing each other. We got so caught up in our own needs and our own feelings that we forgot to pay attention to what the other person needed or felt. We started making assumptions instead of asking questions." Alex thought about this, turning it over in his mind like a stone he was examining from all angles. She was right, he realized. Somewhere along the way, they had stopped being curious about each other and started being certain instead. Certain that they knew what the other person was thinking. Certain that they understood each other's motivations. Certain that they were right and the other person was wrong. "I did that," Alex said finally. "I stopped asking you what you needed and started assuming I already knew. And when my assumptions were wrong, I got frustrated instead of realizing that the problem was with my assumptions, not with you." Maya smiled at this, a small but genuine smile that made Alex's heart skip. "We both did it," she said. "I think that's what happens when you're with someone for a long time. You start to think you know everything about them, So you stop paying attention to the ways they're growing and changing. They talked for an hour, maybe longer, not about the big fight that had ended everything, but about the smaller things that had led up to it, the way they had stopped checking in with each other about their days, the way they had started making plans without consulting each other, the way they had begun to take each other's presence for granted instead of treating it like the gift it was. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was different from the fights they used to have. This time they were both listening, really listening, instead of just waiting for their turn to speak. This time they were both trying to understand, instead of trying to be right. "I want to try again," Maya said when they had talked through most of their coffee. "But I want to do it better this time. I want us to promise to keep paying attention to each other, to keep asking questions instead of making assumptions." "I want that too," Alex said, and he meant it completely. "I want to earn your trust again, and I want to trust you with my heart again, even though it's scary." Maya reached across the table and took his hand, intertwining their fingers the way they used to do. Her hand felt exactly the same as he remembered, warm and soft and perfectly sized to fit with his. "It is scary," she agreed. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe being a little scared means we won't take each other for granted this time." Alex squeezed her hand gently, looking out the window at the street below where people were starting their own days, beginning their own stories. He and Maya were beginning a new story too, he realized. Not a continuation of their old one, but something fresh and different, built on the foundation of everything they had learned about love and loss and the courage it takes to try again. "So, what happens now?" Alex asked. Maya smiled, and this time it was the full, bright smile he had fallen in love with 3 years ago. "Now we finish our coffee," she said, "and then we start figuring out how to be happy together again."